What's interesting about insulin resistance is that it's such a sneaky thing. There is a study called the Whitehall Study 2 that I put in the book. Chapter 2, I talk about being a sugar burner. And when you're a sugar burner, it leads to metabolic disease. That means you have insulin resistance. And it's really tricky because most people, they're not testing their fasting insulin. They are testing their fasting blood sugar, which is a great metric, and their A1C, which is another great metric, looking at the 3 month average of their blood sugars. But the Whitehall study, too, shows that you could have full blown hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, for on average 6 to 14 years without your fasting blood sugars changing at all, or even your hemoglobin A1C changing at all. That is because your body, your pancreas, is so busy producing massive amounts of insulin to clear that excess glucose for years until it cannot, until the receptor sites for insulin go deaf to the screams. Then there's an increase in your blood sugar, and then you're diagnosed with prediabetes. And if you wait long and you don't test, it's full on type 2 diabetes or diabetes. So if we just got a fasting insulin blood test, we could stop this, nip it in the bud. A fasting insulin blood test you want to see in the single digits. Ideally, the functional range is between 3 and 6, really small margin there. When I test mine, it's always 3.3, 3.2. The reference range that comes back on that lab report for a fasting insulin is between 3 and 25. Some labs, it's between 3 and 28, which is wild because if you come back as 11 or 17 or 21, most doctors will not flag it as being an issue, but that is insulin resistance. It's a problem. If you have anything over 6, it's an issue. And it's the first domino to fall that triggers high blood pressure, weight gain, obesity, diabetes. And once you're diagnosed with diabetes, that's when it opens up a whole world of metabolic diseases. You get an increase in cancer, increase in heart disease, increase in kidney failure, vision loss, neuropathy, a whole bunch of bad things happen. And nobody really even dies from diabetes. It's pretty rare. It's what the diabetes leads to, the strokes, the heart disease, the cancer. But if you just got a fasting insulin, you could see that it's going in the wrong direction and make a change right now. I encourage everybody watching and listening to get a fasting insulin test. Usually insurance companies don't cover it. You would have to pay out of pocket, but it's a very inexpensive test, $30, $60 in the US. Highly recommend everybody get that.
Okay, other than fasting insulin, any other objective tests people can have done to see where they're at in relation to insulin resistance? And then for somebody at home right now, thinking they might be in that category, which given the stats of 90+% of people right now are metabolically unhealthy, aka insulin resistant, any symptoms they can look for without going to the doctor to get an idea of what's going on?
Yes, I'll start with the symptoms and then I'll talk about some other metrics for testing that we can look at. In that same chapter, chapter 2, in the book about being a sugar burner, actually it's chapter 3, not chapter 2. I have a sugar burner quiz where I ask 6 questions to help identify if you're a sugar burner versus a fat burner. So I'll ask your audience these 6 questions. If you answer yes to 2 of these 6 questions, 2 or more of these 6 questions, high probability you're a sugar burner and probably have insulin resistance. First question is, do you feel tired after eating meals? Second question, do you snack in between your meals? Third question, do you have more than 20 pounds of extra weight on your body? Third question, do you have any skin tags on your body? They usually show up around your eyelids, your neck, your armpit area. The fifth question is, do you have any brown patches underneath your armpits or around your neck? And the sixth question is, if you skip a meal, do you get hungry and angry? If you're listening and watching and you said yes to 2 or more, you're a sugar burner. And that's an issue because, as I mentioned, that leads to a whole bunch of issues. But the good news is that there's things you can do about it. So if we've got some other lab work done, here's what I would look at. I like the A1C. The A1C is great. Insulin will change before the A1C, but the A1C, a blood test looking at the 3-month average of your blood sugar, when it's elevated, it will age you very fast. It will strip collagen from your body, which makes your skin look old and wrinkly. So visibly, it ages you, but internally it's aging you as well. When you're a sugar burner, you're not metabolically free. You're in a metabolic prison. You have energy fluctuations throughout the day. You're relying on snacking and grazing for a short energy burst. You just don't feel satisfied. You're hungry all the time. And the A1C will show you if your blood sugars are elevated. Ideally, we want that A1C to be 5.2% or below. That's showing you're aging gracefully. Once that A1C gets around to 5.7% to 6.4%, you're considered pre-diabetic, and anything above is considered diabetic. And there's a study that I put in the book that shows when the A1C is at 7.5% or higher, every single year it's at that level, they estimate 100 days come off the person's lifespan. So if it's at that level for 15 years, you lose 4 years off your lifespan. That is because when you have high levels of sugar in your body, it strips nitric oxide. You've had Dr. Nathan Bryan, right, Jesse?
Yes.
Brilliant guy, world-renowned researcher on nitric oxide, great buddy of mine. Nitric oxide is such an important gaseous molecule. It's responsible for so many things, cell signaling and mitochondrial support. But one of those main things it's responsible for is vasodilation, where nitric oxide opens up your blood vessels, which allows blood flow, oxygen, nutrients to deliver to tissues for healing. When your blood sugars are elevated, it lowers and strips nitric oxide, which creates vasoconstriction, the narrowing of your blood vessels, which makes your heart have to pump harder to get the job done, which is what? High blood pressure, which is one of the leading causes to heart disease. So we want to look at the A1C to see if it's elevated. Now, inflammation is another key metric here. There are several inflammatory markers you could look at. I would argue that fasting insulin, although it's not a direct inflammatory marker, to me, it's an indirect inflammatory marker, but high sensitivity C-reactive protein, HSCRP, great inflammatory marker to look at systemic inflammation. You want to see that under 1.0. For me, I like to see it under 0.5. And homocysteine is another great inflammatory marker looking at inflammation. You want to see that in the single digits. So those would be some key markers I would look at and test at least once a year, but even better every 6 months.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I focused on hormones and inflammation. I lost 80 pounds of fat in 9 months. I went from 34% body fat at my highest to 6% body fat at my leanest. And that was 17 plus years ago. I am proof that it worked, and I kept it off since then.